course, we've hit that big 40, but it wasn't always like this. You only had 800 followers on Instagram, and your personal brand's grown. You know, you've blown up your Instagram, your YouTube, and so many people know. Today, I'm with the man himself, one of the founders we've actually been working with for a while now. Joost, 23 years old, absolutely killing it in the Airbnb space, if I must say. And, you know, you scaled up in such a quick time. I think you're at 40 plus properties now, or am I right?
Yeah, kind of like we've got, I mean, around 40 under our control, and then probably uh, there's quite a few. We've got some big deals in the pipeline, so
Nice.
we'll see. I'd like to be like, I reckon we could probably get to like 70, 80 by the end of the year. We've got two very big, like we've got one for a block of 15 apartments that we're just, the developer, because we're working with quite a big development company on that, and that's
Nice.
like a management contract. But they're just taking ages to review the contract because it's got to go through legals and solicitors, and so that's 15 apartments, and then we've got another big agent which is like another 20 houses. So if that all goes through, we'll be like, that's why I say I'd like to be at least at 70 by the end of the year, which I think is very doable.
100%. And it's crazy to see your growth, because I know when we first started working together, you scaled to 18 units within 2 years, which
Yeah.
I already thought was insane. But now you've taken it to another level, which, you know, we're so excited to learn a little bit more. And, you know, super excited for this one, Yost, because it's been a long time coming, I would say. We've been working together for a while now, but goal of the video is I just want you to introduce yourself first and just your backstory, you know, how you got into Airbnb and then the info space.
Yeah, so as I said, 23 years old. I've been doing an Airbnb business now for about 2 years. To go a little bit before that, like, was kind of your typical, like, what I'd say, like every entrepreneur says in school, like, wasn't the best in school. You know, probably if you
Yeah.
spoke to some of my teachers, they'd say, like, yeah, this kid doesn't shut the fuck up. And that's, you know, that was probably true. So, but never like badly behaved, just like probably what you'd call like disruptive. So a lot of that, and then so GCSEs was just like a mid-tier student, and I think one of the things that I have noticed within myself, if I look back at habits or traits that I had as a younger child that have definitely picked up onto now, is that I was just obsessed, but I wasn't obsessed with school. When I was younger, for me, like between like, you know, probably like 11 to 16, the things that I was obsessed with were video games and rugby. So I played a lot of rugby and I played a lot of video games. And I would say that I was pretty decent at both of them. I think that competitive edge or that drive to like really want to just be the best if you can be. Obviously, generally you're not always going to be the best, but try and be to get the most out of your natural ability, talent, whatever you can get. So I went to the University of Nottingham, which is obviously like, it's a pretty well-regarded uni.
Yeah.
Don't think uni was the right thing for me in hindsight, but I think at the time I didn't know that, and a lot of people don't necessarily know that. So I went to university for a year. I went during COVID, so it was a bit of a weird time anyway. Ended up basically dropping out of that because I got offered a degree apprenticeship at Amazon. So I worked as a project manager in basically sustainable fashion at Amazon for about 2-3 years.
Nice.
Alongside that, the reason that I essentially got that job at Amazon in the first place was actually in my kind of during COVID and my first year of uni. That's when I started my first kind of proper business, let's say, and that was an Amazon FBA business. So I started an Amazon FBA business, and that basically, it never really took off, but I also never really put the effort in. You know, I hadn't invested in any kind of mentorship or anything like that, so I didn't really know what I was doing besides like watching YouTube videos and kind of do bits. And like, I made like a little bit of money off of it, but nothing crazy. And I just wasn't really invested in it enough. Like I hated the product sourcing, all that kind of stuff. It was like just so boring. So that was not the one for me, but it helped me get my degree apprenticeship, because obviously if you're applying at Amazon for a job and you say, oh yeah, well, I know the systems, I've worked and done all this. So that massively helped me. So I dropped out of my first year of uni to get that degree apprenticeship. That was really, really good. I learned an insane amount from that. And I think again, if I look at some of the key things that I learned, is that people like to shit on a 9 to 5, or people like to say, "Oh, don't do a 9 to 5" or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think it's really good, especially if you're younger. So I started working in that corporate environment when I was 19. Because of the team I got placed in, I was working with like, in Amazon they've got levels, but let's say like director and head of team levels. The team I got placed in was just really high level. So I was working with some like, if you're talking like VP, director, and then like my line manager and me. So like at a very short, basically chain of command, a very short, flat organizational structure for me in that team, which meant I learned a lot. And
Nice.
that was super valuable. So I think a lot of people immediately don't want to go into 9 to 5, but forget that there's a lot of soft skills and there's a lot of things you learn from being in that corporate environment, which can massively benefit you coming out of it.
100%.
So that was super, super valuable for me. And then essentially alongside that, some things changed. There was like a back end COVID recession on tech. They laid off, they basically made redundant a fair bit of my team. And for me at the time, I was like, I got kept on probably because I was on a government scheme. They couldn't let go of me. So it kind of opened my eyes again of like, oh, is this really what I want to do for the rest of my life? Because I had the kind of vision I'd had in mind while working in there. I was like, well, I'm gonna become a VP, president, maybe even CEO of Amazon. I'll just keep going. Like that was my vision. I was just like, I'm just gonna work my way up this ladder and like, make a lot of money that way. Because I've always been financially driven, but I'd say the security behind the financial is what really has driven me in that.
Sure.
So that was really good. And then, kind of started being like, oh, maybe this isn't for me, because I saw these people who are really good at their job essentially got laid off for no reason. So then I kind of started exploring things again. I'd always been interested in property. My mum had done a bit of stuff in property prior, like, a house that we used to live in, turned it into a buy-to-let, and nothing crazy, but like some simple things. So I'd always been interested in it. And like, obviously everyone knows property is a great space to make money. You just have to know what you're doing. And that's how I kind of stumbled into the system, found about Airbnb, rent to rent, all this kind of stuff. And I was like, this is amazing. I can make money off properties that I don't even own. And that was kind of a game changer for me. And then I just ran with it and I just kept going.
100%. 100%. And for you, I know when we started working together, I think the back end of November, it was, I know you did a little bit of coaching just before we came on Bits, but, you went from 0 to 30K in the space of that 3 months time. And then of course we've hit that big 40, but it wasn't always like this, and we wasn't always hitting consistent 20 or 30Ks when scaling up. What do you think it was for you that, made you wanted to go into the info business and the coaching? Because you were doing pretty well with your Airbnb business. You were doing really well. So what was that for you?
For me, there's two words that I would say, which is leverage and impact. So what I mean by that is, our core business model is either rent to rent or Airbnb management for our clients. We don't do any sourcing. We don't do any of that, right? So that's purely our core business model. And, it does well for us. We're scaling the business. We've got, we've hired 2 new people in the last week, and we've got 2 more full-time UK employees. So we'll be at a team of 10 very soon.
Nice.
Of 10 full-time employees on the business, which is obviously quite a bit to grow to. But at the end of the day, there's only so many Airbnbs you can manage. And there's only so many, there's a cap on that at some point. Now, whereas on coaching and social media, for me, having an Airbnb coaching stuff, that's not the end game for me. That's not where I see that as okay, this is what I'm going to do forever. What I see is I need to grow a personal brand and leverage that, because I can exchange that, that in itself is a currency and a value. So if I have, 1,000 followers or 15,000 or 1 million or whatever, and whether you want to say followers, engagement, whatever it is, right, that is a super valuable currency to have. So anytime then I were to launch, a software company or this or that, I have the leverage to do so, and immediately it's 10 times likely to be more successful. So there's a much larger leverage and impact on that. And that's why I want to get into it. For me, it's not just about the coaching. So for the coaching, you can have an impact because you can help people get out of their jobs and stuff like that. And that's amazing.
Yeah.
Because, you know, although there's only so many Airbnbs I can manage in Leeds, you know, there's still about a million other ones in London or wherever, right? So there's so much opportunity out there. And I think it's such an undervalued business model because, you know, I think everyone jumps on like your SMMA or, you know, your Amazon FBA or all kind of newer age business models. But actually what Airbnb is like, it's like basically property done the new way. And it's like making money in property, but doing it in a more online, remote, systemized, entrepreneurial way. And I think because it's property is kind of quite an old boys industry or whatever you want to call it that it really lacks that for a lot of people who are really entrepreneurs. Because a lot of people go into the Airbnb space, go like, oh, I'm going to get 5 Airbnbs and I'm going to go back, I'm going to look at doing buy, refurbish, refinance. And I've said like, nah, I want to be cash flowing hundreds of thousands, if not millions. Like, and I'm going to do that all through this model in this way. And there's just not many players in the space doing that.
100%.
But yeah, to touch on like why I wanted to go into coaching and stuff like that was like I wanted to build my personal brand, because I think like, you know, you're kind of, if you look at your god tier guys like your Alex Hormozy, your Imans, your all these guys, right? At the end of the day, you know, the currency that they really exchange is their knowledge and their personal brand, and then within that they can make an insane amount of money off the back end, even if their business models are different. Whether it's coaching, for Alex Hormozy, it's actually, he doesn't really do much coaching, but he invests into people's companies, you know, whether it's taking equity stake in businesses and basically helping them with the marketing because you've got your personal, whatever it is, right? There's so many different things that you can run off the back of your personal brand, and that has such a high amount of leverage and impact that's where I see myself going in the future.
I think that's a really good take, because I know a lot of people when they want to go into coaching, it's that, you know, to build maybe the pot of money, you know, hit 20K, hit 50K. But it's so great to hear that perspective of, you know, your personal brand's grown, you know, you've blown up your Instagram, your YouTube, and so many people know about you now in the space. Talk to us a little bit about, you know, because I know you tried coaching a little bit. I think it was a year before we started working together. How did you find the first experience? Just when you, Francisco, doing it yourself, how was that?
I think I was just naive. I didn't really I think the offer wasn't packaged correctly. We were probably undercharging. And I would say is when you start any new kind of business venture or whatever, so when you go from like doing it kind of casually and like just kind of an add-on that we were offering to really turning it into a proper business model, is I've learned so much from that, like in terms of funnels, ads, marketing, you know, CRMs, all this stuff. Like I've learned so many things through that process, that like, you know, that's invaluable to me because that's knowledge I'll hold forever.
100%. And I think the one thing I actually do like, and me and you've had our conversations, because you know you are so obsessed about the funnel, obsessed about ads, and you know you have kind of taken it upon yourself to learn the nature of the beast, which is probably one of the reasons why you're in the position right now, in terms of, you know, you understand, you know, copy now, you understand content, YouTube, all these type of things. For you, when you say the offer, you know, and you say underpricing, because you was doing like a done for you, wasn't you? For 3K,
so we were doing like sourcing the properties for these clients, which was like 3K, and then we had an additional back end where we have like a couple like one-to-one sessions with them for additional 500 quid. Now, if I look back at that, we should have been charging like at least like $2,000 for those sessions. But at the time, I didn't really know any better.
No. Would you say, you know, obviously now I know the Airbnb business was making some good money before, and you guys have scaled up, but what would you say as coaching allowed you to Apart from the personal brand, is there any more you can do now that you couldn't do before? Now you've made that extra pot of money. What has that kind of allowed you to do for the business?
Coaching is it's great in terms of profit margin, stuff like that. Um,
Mm,
but what it has allowed me to do, going back to my previous point, is it's taught me so much in terms of these other skills that I've learned that I've then been able to transfer that into my Airbnb business, which is a more mature business, and scale that
mm.
even further. That's what I would say.
Nice.
So
Nice.
that's how it's all come together very well, in that you can learn a lot of skills, and a lot of things that you didn't necessarily know because it's slightly different models or this or that, and then actually realize like shit, a lot of people aren't doing this, or this
Yeah.
funnel could be applied to this way, and that's what it's done. So it's essentially grown the whole thing together as a kind of
Yeah.
organization.
Nice. And when you did join back, a couple of months back, those first 2 weeks were quite interesting because I know you took a few other calls. You had a really real small following at the time, and
Mm.
you hit 10K in the space of 2 weeks. We was like, okay, cool. There's definitely something here.
Mm.
But before joining, you only had 800 followers on Instagram, and most people they would say, let me grow my following, let me grow my brand
Mm.
before I even go into selling info or selling a product. And because you didn't see success the first time, what was it that made you pull the trigger to say, you know what, I'm going to do this again. I'm going to work with these guys and try to scale up again? What would you say?
I think the most important thing that you have to realize is that, I don't know where I heard it, but essentially something that really changed my perspective is for a lot of businesses, your ideal client is you 2 years ago. So if I looked at me 2 years ago, I needed something like that probably to have more one-to-one mentorship and access to someone. I probably
Yeah.
needed that. Within that, you very much have to understand that I only had like 1,000 followers, right, when we started working together. But it's not the it's not always the quantity of followers, it's the brand that I built off the back of that. So even within the industry and within certain spaces within the industry, I was fairly, let's say, known for having done XYZ with Airbnb. So
Yeah.
and we'd already had people coming to us asking us for this stuff. So I think a
Yeah.
lot of people, I think the coaching side of, like, there's a lot of people who say, oh, it's just a money grab, scammers, courses, blah, blah, blah. And now, while there is unfortunately people like that in the space, I think a lot of people who are more genuine about it actually is just like, oh, I'm continuously getting asked these questions and people are continuously asking me for help
Yeah.
and they're willing to pay me, so I should monetize it in XYZ way.
And touching on that, you spoke about, scammers and, people that try to sell courses, which is a great point because, when you first started, you were quite new to coaching in terms of when we restarted. And I know fulfillment was a big thing for me and you. We worked together on a few
Mm.
projects to try, help with lead flow for the clients and the
Yeah.
mentees. But, to make that product the best we could to help everyone get the result, I think that was one of our big goals.
Yeah.
And, you helped Nikki get that property, Fintan get that property, and a few others now that's starting to come through, and it's amazing to see. Um, but what would you say for you, having the team on the back end to help you out? How did that allow you to focus? Because people, you look at founders and they try to do content, fulfillment,
Mm.
sales, marketing, operations. How did having that team behind you help you? And what did it allow you to focus on, would you say?
I think again, one of the things that I've learned from this whole experience and venture is, and coincidentally, a lot of the stuff that content or knowledge that I've been consuming recently is that, again, if we talk about leverage, that hiring people and having teams is the most important thing you can do. Now, obviously, there is a caveat to that, is a no hire is better than a bad hire. That's also true.
Yeah.
But if you bring in people who know what they're doing and massively help you, then it leverages up so much. Like, you know, in the coaching business, I don't have to do operational admin tasks. I barely, I film all the Instagram content, but I don't post it. I don't do the captions, that kind of stuff. But I'm still in my Instagram every day. And that, there's all sorts of things that you can do. And it's the same with my Airbnb business, with like guests, with getting clients, with bookings, all that kind of stuff. Like once you start to bring on people into your organization, you realize it can just turn into a whole different beast, because you suddenly see things getting done and it's not you doing that work. And again, when you talk about leverage, the highest leverage thing you can have is bring additional manpower into your business. And sometimes like you just gotta you gotta pay for that. You gotta suck it up. You gotta either invest in your knowledge, invest in your team, invest in agency, invest in people, whatever it is, because you can't grow and you can't get better if you don't invest, and you need to access that information somehow.
Yeah, great point you make there. I think that's the one thing, we try to do is hire the right team, right talent. And as you say, not everyone's amazing. Not everyone's going to be good at you in certain things in Airbnb specifically. We even like with the lead sourcing we did, the quality of lead wasn't amazing, but we had to fine tune and change. But the amount of leverage that gave us, because now we had a fulfillment in process for the mentees. I think that was powerful. So for the guys, Joost, that want to scale up, their info business, go from 0 to 40K like you have, or they want to get started and they're waiting to get more followers, they're currently struggling with finding the right team, implementing systems. What advice would you give to them? What would you say to them?
Step by step. So first thing I would do is understand your market and create an offer, and then create a back end to that offer. So you need to understand, okay, I have got XYZ. I'm going to offer one-to-one coaching for this, but I also need to have landing pages. I also need to have a bank of online content. I need to have this, that, etc. And once you build that back end offer, it becomes a lot easier, because you can understand very quickly what is working and what isn't. And I think, a lot of business people who are probably a bit more like, me or you, I'm more sales side, front end generally. But I think to have a really good coaching offer, and not just one that makes money, but one that is successful longevity wise, is you've got to create something really in detailed on the back end. And that's, I think, is super important. So that's the first thing I would do. Then I would start, there's kind of two things. It was like, one, starting to put the feelers out and have discussions with people, because the first thing you need to do is actually speak to people who could be your clients. Speak to them and understand, okay, what is it you're looking for? What are your needs? Where's your pain points? What are you struggling with? All that kind of stuff. Like, that's generally another step. And then the other step I would say is get access to knowledge, a team, whatever it is. Like, you need to have either got access to information so you can understand it, process it, and output on it, or you need to have people in your business who know more about it than you do. Because, whether people want to say, like, running an info business, coaching business is not easy. No matter what, like, everyone wants to say or talk about, or be like, oh yeah, you just sell courses or whatever. It's genuinely not easy. Like, it's not. So if you want to do that successfully, just like any other industry, you have to have someone in your corner, or someone who's giving you information that knows more about it than you do.
100. I couldn't agree more with you on that one, to be honest with you, bro. And for you, in terms of your future plans now, you have, grown the brand. The Airbnb business is growing. You're only 23 years old. I know you're going out to, is it Thailand soon? Where did you say you're going with is it Thailand, isn't it?
I'm going Sweden next week, and then 3 weeks in Thailand.
Nice. And I know you've really started to work with other founders that are growing their business.
Yeah.
And I know we spoke about that G-Wagon as well, which is, always excited to speak about. What's the big goal for you now? What's the plan?
Long-term goal is to essentially have an impact, in the sense of, I want people to, especially younger guys, because I see a lot of, like, and I felt that probably very much through like 18 to 20, of like, I was just there like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? Like, I had no idea what I wanted to do. Um, I had, I had this idea of like, I knew I needed to make money. I saw like,
Yeah.
I understood the financial system, the way it operates, and how it is essentially, unless you do certain things, it's just geared against you.
Yeah.
And I think that um, I think it creates a lot of resentment and a lot of anger, and I don't think people necessarily know how to challenge it, or channel it,
Yeah.
sorry, in the right way. So I want to be able to help people essentially say like, okay, this is the way the system is, and it sucks. Like it's not really geared to help you, but you can actually do certain things and create certain steps to leverage it to play into your advantage. But you don't have to do that in a way where you tear everybody else down and suddenly everyone else is evil. And it doesn't have to.
Yeah.
It seems to be this kind of two-way thing of like, there can be a path down where it's like, actually I can make money and do this, but I can also want to help people and do good for other people at the same time. And that's like, for me, is my long-term message or impact that I want to have on people, is like, look, you can, the system is rigged against you, so play the system. But then when you start to beat it a little bit and you start to get that freedom, start to kind of give back to people and start to help people and start to do those kind of things.
And I feel like I can resonate with you there because, I'm quite similar to you in terms of starting an online business and, same background. Obviously, I played football and went into work in a 9 to 5, and those skills allowed me to learn different things to go into this business. So it's something I resonate with. And this is why I think this space is so important with entrepreneurs. And it doesn't have to be resentment against a 9 to 5 or other people that choose that way. You just have to know the system's against you, and you have to get resourceful and get the skills you need to then go hit the goals you want to hit. What would you say, Joost, for anyone who's watching this? They've been watching my content. They're a little bit on the fence and they don't really know if they're ready to make that jump to work with me and the team. What would you say to someone who is 50-50 and just hasn't pulled that trigger yet?
What I would say is that you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's a very common, but like, you don't know what you don't know. And if you really actually zoom out for a minute, okay, and go, okay, what's my best case scenario here? Everything I've ever wanted, let's say. And my worst case is like, okay, I lost a bit of money and I spent some time or something, but I still learned stuff from it. Then I think a lot of people would get a lot of shit done a lot quicker if they started to look at decisions like that instead of focusing on all these tiny little fears in between.
I think, Joost, that our interview today has been unbelievable, and really enjoyed it. I know it's one we've been calling it on the cards for a while, so I'm glad we got it done. But Joost, for the people that want to get into Airbnb, they've been thinking about it, but maybe they need to speak to you or get more information. What's your socials? What's your tag on Instagram or your YouTube as well?
I mean,
add it in
you might have to, because of my name, it's my Instagram is literally just Joost.mijnaarens, but because of you're gonna have to put it up on the screen so they can see it, because otherwise, like, they're not gonna be able to spell it. But it's just my name, like Joost.mijnaarens, and that's my Instagram. And then the same for the YouTube. If you just search my name, it'll come up.
Nice.
But yeah, that's what I would say. So you can give it a little plug.
I'll give it a plug. Don't worry, I'll look after you. But that being said, guys, any questions? Drop down some comments down below. Apart from that, we'll see you in the next video.